Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to unpack the absolutely incredible business backstory of how a profound desire for freedom birthed one of the most recognizable global luxury empires in history. We so often just see the modern branding, right? The interlocking letters, the quilted bags, but the foundational story of this company is a literal masterclass in market disruption. Let's get into it. So how exactly did an orphaned rebel use men's underwear and the color of mourning to build the world's most iconic luxury business? It's a fascinating question, and it drops us straight into one of the greatest rags to riches founder stories of all time. When you really look at the building blocks of this business's early days, it sounds completely counterintuitive. You have a founder starting with absolutely nothing, utilizing materials associated with men's undergarments, and taking a color entirely associated with death and servitude to somehow create the very pinnacle of high-end fashion. How on earth does that happen?
Section 1. The Belle Époque problem. To really appreciate the brilliance of Chanel's business strategy, we first have to understand the massive market failure she was solving. The reigning trend of the early 1900s was this Belle Époque style. And hey, from a purely aesthetic standpoint, it was beautiful. But from a functional product standpoint, absolute disaster. Customers were being sold these suffocating corsets, restrictive floor-length skirts, and massive, heavily feathered hats. The end result was basically complete immobility for women. From a business perspective, the entire industry was built on a product line that literally trapped its end user. Crazy, right?
Which brings us to a minimalist milliner emerges. Enter Gabrielle Coco Chanel, an orphan raised by nuns who absolutely despised these constraints and saw a massive opportunity to break the rules. This is a classic David versus Goliath contrast when she first entered the market. So the nuns who raised Chanel had actually taught her how to sew. And rather than just accepting the restrictive fashion of her era, she weaponized that skill against the status quo. In 1910, she opens this tiny hat shop, a millinery at 21 Rue Cambon in Paris. While the market norm was just churning out these massive, over-the-top, heavily feathered pieces, Chanel's vision was a complete pivot. Her hats were lightweight, they were sleek, they were minimalist. She was offering women a physical reprieve, and really it was the spark of a total revolution. Next up, the jersey fabric breakthrough. Let's move to the next phase and see how this builds as she expands into apparel and faces her very first major supply chain crisis. Now, what did high fashion have in common with men's underwear? I love this detail because it sounds completely absurd, right? But it perfectly highlights her sheer business audacity. What on earth could the burgeoning world of high fashion possibly have in common with men's undergarments?
Well, the crucial point here is that she used a global constraint to fundamentally change her product line. During World War I, traditional luxury materials became incredibly scarce. It was a massive supply chain shortage. But instead of folding, Chanel borrowed an idea from men's sportswear and did something truly revolutionary. She went out and bought jersey fabric. At the time, this material was reserved exclusively for men's underwear. Literally nobody considered it for high-end women's apparel. But she took this flexible, breathable fabric to create fluid, comfortable drop-waist dresses and separates. She turned a mundane, hidden fabric into a comfortable, game-changing solution that finally gave women their mobility back.
And that leads us to reclaiming the color black. Having successfully solved the physical comfort problem, she next set her sights on disrupting the psychological constraints of her market.
Talk about a marketing masterpiece. Before the 1920s, if you wore black, you were either a servant or you were in a strict period of mourning. It had incredible psychological baggage. But in 1926, Chanel completely disrupted this reality. She introduced the little black dress, the iconic LBD, in Vogue magazine. Through sheer force of design and brilliant branding, she took a universally recognized symbol of grief and transformed it into the absolute ultimate statement of chic, universal sophistication. She just completely rewrote the rules of elegance. When we trace this rapid business evolution on a timeline, you can clearly see the pace at which she dismantled the suffocating norms of her era. In just over a decade and a half, we go from an industry that physically immobilizes its customers in the early 1900s to a tiny minimalist hat shop disrupting Paris in 1910, all the way to a global fashion reset with the little black dress in 1926. It is a stunningly fast trajectory of product innovation and market capture. Getting near the end here, let's look at the meaning behind the monogram. As we wrap up our explainer, we discover how her brand identity brought her incredible journey completely full circle.
I just think it's incredibly powerful that she chose to permanently weave her scrappy, humble beginnings directly into the DNA of global haute couture. The world-famous interlocking CC monogram is not just some random sleek design choice generated in a corporate boardroom. It was actually adapted directly from the stained glass windows of the Aubazine Abbey orphanage where she grew up and learned her craft. So every single time you see that ultimate symbol of luxury, you're actually looking at a direct tribute to an orphan's upbringing in a convent. Wow.
And this single quote really serves as the ultimate summary of her business ethos, a relentless focus on solving the pain points of her customers. Luxury must be comfortable, otherwise it is not luxury. She recognized that true value in a product isn't just about how it looks to everybody else, it's about how it feels to the person actually using it. She built a massive empire simply by insisting that women deserved both elegance and freedom at the exact same time.
You know, Chanel didn't just design clothes, she engineered freedom. She looked at a market that trapped its consumers and offered them a very real way out, utilizing unconventional materials and radically changing the perception of color. So it really begs the question, Chanel built an empire by breaking the rules of comfort. What suffocating rules is today's fashion industry waiting to break? I'll leave you to ponder that provocative question about modern consumer expectations. Thank you so much for diving into this explainer with me.